Trump backs off border shutdown but threatens Mexico auto tariffs. Washington abandoning his threat to immediately seal the southern border, President Donald Trump warned instead that he'd slap tariffs on cars coming to the U.S. from Mexico unless the Mexicans do more to stop the flow of migrants and drugs to the U.S. In his latest backtrack in recent days, Trump told reporters Thursday he would try the less Mexico. It was the latest, seemingly sudden attempt at new leverage by a president struggling to solve what his administration has called a border crisis. And it was a dramatic, Trump said at the time that he was not. Since then, however, White House advisors, border city leaders and U.S. economists have warned that such a move would have enormous economic consequences on both sides of the border, interrupting supply chains and boosting U.S. consumer prices on everything from avocados to autos. Trump in recent days has also backtracked on his push for Republicans to again take on health care and surprised his own education secretary by reversing a plan to axe federal aid for the Special Olympics. Those actions have only added to long-standing concerns about whether Trump's words can be trusted. Trump had already appeared to be easing off his border threat earlier this week. Though he said Tuesday, Marcelo Ebrard, Mexico's Foreign Relations Secretary, said Tuesday his government had not changed its policies. And on Thursday, Jesus Seed, the Mexican Undersecretary for North America, also brushed off the threat of new tariffs, saying officials were not. On Thursday, Trump also threatened tariffs if Mexico doesn't halt the flow of illegal drugs across the border, saying he'd give the country a but. As for concerns his actions might interfere with the trade deal he fought for, Trump said the border was more. Trump has wide-ranging power to impose tariffs on national security grounds, which he has repeatedly used as leverage against other countries. But the USM's in addition, despite what Trump suggests, Mexico, China and other American trading partners don't pay U.S. tariffs directly. American importer tariffs do squeeze the manufacturers who export to the U.S. from foreign countries by making their products more expensive in the United States. But there again, Trump has been increasingly exasperated at his inability to halt the swelling number of migrants entering the U.S., including thousands who have been released after arriving because border officials have no space for them. Arrests along the president's pretty. Trump has invoked other executive powers, including declaring a national emergency in an effort to secure more money for his long-promised border wall. Congress voted. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said Thursday that Democrats would file a lawsuit aimed at preventing Trump from stealing billions from federal programs and diverting the money to building barriers along the border. Administration officials had been studying ways to minimize the economic impact of a potential border closure in case Trump went through with his threat, including keeping trucking lanes open or closing only certain ports. But even absent that extraordinary step, delays at border stations have been mounting after some 2,000 border officers were reassigned from checking vehicles to deal with migrant crowds. Originally appeared on Friday, April 5, 2019.
Raindrop, drop top, smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.